Time for Flashback. Tracks from the past. With your host, DJ Daemon.
Today, just one very short retro game review. Not the whole episode, just a small one, and it's an interesting game. But I also have to start this show by dispelling a rumor. Well, I'm sorry to say he's not dead. It was just that death had a very short brush with Chuck Norris. And talking about Chuck Norris, here is the first song. It's Zantac of Smeuch and Euphorbia, and kicked by Chuck Norris. Yes, it's a C64 SID. Not the usual fare on this station, but I gotta love myself some SID tunes, because sometimes it's the exact right thing to do. This one was released on Remedy 2000. Yeah, great one. We will go on with the first medley and the only medley you get today. It's starting with Enacostione and Till Raining, then it's Retro 104 with Moon Crater Circuit, and finally Substance and Pattern 0. Let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend. That would be Chuck Norris. I actually think he's dead. I'm sorry to say it like that. 86 years old, that is not a bad thing at all. Life is no how permanent, so there we go. Chuck Norris down. Yeah, he was born in 1940 and he was an American martial artist and an action film star. After serving in the US Air Force, he became a champion martial artist and earned a black belt and then some in several disciplines. He later created his own martial arts system called the Chun Kuk Do. Norris first worked in Hollywood as a martial arts instructor for celebrities. Then he made his screen debut in The Wrecking Crew. Bruce Lee invited him to play a major villain in The Way of the Dragon, and that helped him launching an acting career. Encouraged by Steve McQueen to pursue acting seriously, Norris starred in Breaker, and then The Good Guys Wear Black. The latter making him a popular action movie figure. Was he good? Well, I think he was super cheesy. But we talk about that later on in this program. Going on with Cycler 2 and Luna 197. The song is called Melt. cute little ending of that song. Alright, we'll talk a little bit about the game you're getting today, and I think you know what it is. It has to be with Chuck Norris, of course. Yes, it is. It is exactly that. And that's not necessarily good news. But Chuck himself then. First of all, he kind of overplayed his macho style so much that he became a parody onto himself. And a few years later, someone made a little bit of fun of him. It was a meme, you know, those Chuck Norris facts that are kind of over-embellishing how cool he was. And it has been an internet phenomena for years now. You know how those goes. It's more like, you know, Chuck Norris is not doing push-ups. He simply pushes the earth down. Yeah, he was kind of pictured in those memes like he was some sort of god. But he was really cheesy. But I gotta say, I think the guy is really cool, or was really cool, because he could really fight for real. That dude actually were able to make his own school of teaching martial arts. So that's kind of where his quality was. Going on with Enacostione and Another Life. I shouldn't really be mean to Mr. Norris. He deserves a lot of praise for the cool stuff he did. But a friend of mine, let's call him Thomas because that was his name, many years ago told me when this Chuck Norris fact stuff was totally new, he said, you know that loser Chuck Norris, somebody's really handing it to him. He thought that this Chuck Norris fact was not really praise, it was more making fun of him and his uber macho style. Yeah, I remember that. It was kind of an interesting take on the whole thing. But I don't think it was sincere. It was a joke and a good one at it. Going on with Arcane 2's Toaster. And what else is there? Today's retro game review is a short one, not the same kind of things that you have come to expect, but it's time for it anyway. It's Chuck Norris Superkicks. This game came out to the VIC-20, the ColecoVision and the Commodore 64 and the Atari 2600. In 1984 or 83, not really clear of the year to be honest. You play as Chuck Norris and your mission is to save a monastery. You start on some kind of overview where you walk on grass or the road. You have 6 minutes to reach the monastery and you have to fight through some houses or dojos, whatever that is, to get there. And when you do, you meet like 3 guys in tracksuits. No, they're not Russian or anything. They just like, well, dressing like that. They are the same sprite. It's super big, it's ugly, and the fight is like you can block, you can kick, and you can beat. The whole game is super boring. I can't say that I played it because thankfully I have not, but I have seen it on YouTube and read some information. Well, after 6 minutes, if you have the time, I haven't run out of time yet, you reach the monastery and the backgrounds are like nothing. There's some ornamentation in the top of the screen, most of it is black or red or whatever, and it's the same 3 guys. Really boring game. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it and why it has such bad graphics, but first it's Beyond again. Yes, actually, that's almost every day now. Kundalini Torture. So, DJ Daemon, tell me, why was the graphics not that good? I don't know, but I have a theory. It was made for the Atari 2600, ColecoVision and the VIC-20, so I think they actually made the graphics to work with those platforms. The C64 had superior graphics, but when you port from one environment to another one, you kind of have to rebuild the graphics to really use the quality and the capabilities of the new platform. Or, well, you could just don't do that, and the result is pretty obvious. It gets bad. But what did the press think? Well, I tell you, but first, something really nice, a bit Eurotechno-ish, whatever. It's FNX and Surpass. The final word about the game, that it would be Chuck Norris Superkicks. It is what did the press like it? And it's all over the place. It received some good reviews, but mostly were mediocre or worse. It was seen as pretty boring and uninteresting, and Chuck Norris Superkicks is an uneven and sometimes laughable gaming experience. That is not kind of the review you want, and that was a newspaper called Arcane that said that. So obviously it wasn't good by any measure, but we have to give it a rating as well, because that's what Flashback does. It gets 1 out of 5 ETs. So, Viraxor is out with something cool as per usual. It's called Zangered alia. I'm gonna come out with something like an apology here. I promised you a lot of retro game reviews, especially for one very clear game that would be like a monumental one, and this obviously isn't that. I'm kinda out of time time. I don't have time at the moment to make that happen, but it will in a few weeks from now. As you know, revision is coming closer, and that's what we have to focus on. So that's what's going on here on Flashback, Tracks from the Past. I'm DJ Daemon, and here comes Beyond again with a new song called Offer. The pattern when it comes to Flashback, Tracks from the Past right now, is retro game reviews. And I want to tell you that I want you to tell me which games I should review. Well, send an email to radio@ericade.net and tell me about some C64, Amiga or retro PC game. If you have something else, well, I'm ready to listen to that and see what we can do. So, music, it's Platonist and 8-bit 8-sized bytes. We have not talked much about the demo scene as of lately. We should do that, I think. Okay, yeah, I know we talked about Revision and Edison. But looking at demoparty.net, we can see that Cosmos 2026 just ended. It was in Finland. Seems to be a nice one. Then we have, well, on the 23rd of March, it's Momentum number 28. Then comes The Gathering 2026, and that would be the 1st of April. And it's in Denmark. We are going on with Latti Copy Party 2026. Seems illegal. Is it Copy Parties kind of... I don't know. Maybe it's just called that. It's the 3rd of April. And it's from Finland. And then we have the big one. The one we will be covering and everybody just loves to bits. That would be Revision 2026 from Saarbrücken in southern Germany. It starts on the 3rd of April. So that's what you got. You should definitely go, or at least, well, you know, view the Twitch feed of some cool demo party. Beyond again. Yes, seems to be a pattern going on here. It's harsh. bit of an observation, if I may. You would say that most people listen to the radio station, that's ericade.radio, through the website or the YouTube feed. But in reality, a lot of people do, but most people use a player, like Windows Media Player. They use Audacious, Freeamp, and why not Screamer Radio or something like that. I don't know why that is, but if you want the full experience of the radio station, go to ericade.radio. You can request tunes, you can start tunes you like or don't, and of course you can see some information about the artists themselves or what's up next on the station. So you should absolutely do that. ericade.radio. Going on with an unknown artist and demo number 1. talking about the experience you get when you listen to the station through, say, Winamp, Screamer Radio, whatever. You may know that the only information you get is the artist name and the title, and then of course some information about if it's an Amiga tune, impulse track or whatever. But I actually tried to make a interstitial, so to speak, a message that come up a little bit now and then, telling you other stuff like what's up next and the temperature here in Stockholm. The script worked fine, but people started disconnecting as soon as those messages came. I thought, why? Turns out that many of the players can pop up a message in the notification area, which can be very irritating when it happens like once per minute. So I learned the lesson, and well, if you're listening through the player, not on the web page or not on YouTube, it will only now show you the title and the artist. And talking about artists, it's time for Retro 104 and Reluctant Breeze. We have to say goodbye for today. And we have to thank Chuck Norris for being a cool martial arts artist for all those years. And we are leading you into that good night. And I can assure you, Chuck Norris did not go into that good night gently. I know this. The song that ends this program, it would be Turtle of Frantic and Multiplex remix. In a week from now, another episode comes out. ericade.radio.